I'm Nicole. I'm a former consultant turned software engineer. Taylor and I met when we were at the Recurse Center. Recurse is really awesome. It's a enrichment program for experienced software engineers. So it's kind of like a boot camp, but it is run by a small supportive team of full-time staff who are really incredible. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. It definitely set me up on a good path as a career switcher, which could be one of the things that we touch on today, depending on what people are interested in. But mainly, we're here to hear from Taylor and hear about his experience building a career in software engineering and how this relates to his earning to give and his advice for those of us who want to sort of do similarly. All right. Well, I will go ahead and turn it over to Taylor. We have a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started.
Hi, so I'm Taylor. I'm excited to be doing this. I'm going to do a couple of things first. So before we get into real presentations, this first slide is basically like caveats, like reasons why my experience might not generalize to yours. I have sort of done software engineering on easy mode. I went to like a reasonably name brand school. I've like been quite good at interviews. And so those are things that are not necessarily super easy to replicate, but I think they're easier than you might think. But the option is like, I know my experience. I know my experience in sort of systems engineering and finance and like hardware. Things like web development might have more different rules than I expect them to. So your mileage may vary. The other thing is I want to get like a quick sense of who I'm talking to. So I have met no one here except for Nicole. Can I get by a show of hands, who is currently a software engineer? Who has been one for more than 5 years? Okay, mostly relatively new. Half and half relatively new, I'll take that. Okay, just good context for me. So I will breeze through, I've got two sections here. One section is just general sort of strategizing about your career, things that I have found useful, you may find them useful too. And then I'll talk about actual interview preparation, like ways to pass interviews, which is sort of, no matter what your path, a pretty useful skill to have. I'm going to stop in the middle for questions on the first section because I actually think it's more important and sort of more discussion heavy. Let's talk about career planning. I see that this is for EA software engineers. I gave a similar presentation at Recurse Center for general software engineers and found that I did not have to change much. I feel like for most EAs, things that are good for just generally being a software engineer are pretty good for being an EA software engineer. So you still want to do basically the same things, whether you're doing EA or not. You want to define what your goals are. Those could be, if you're in this group, you've probably thought about that. Consider what your limits are, what your requirements are, figure out what you're good at, what you're interested in, and then start exploring. So start with big lists of stuff, plan A, plan B, test things, figure out which of those are really plausible, try to filter out things as quickly as possible, fail fast, all that good stuff. Reevaluate, circle back, do all those things over and over and over until you retire. The thing that I do want to emphasize that 80,000 hours won't is that kind of no matter what you're doing, you get big benefits out of being likable. Like just be like a decent human being to people around you and not super arrogant, and things are a lot easier. Thing that I stole from 80,000 hours and like a lot is you want to spend basically most all your career just learning about options. So do the quickest test you can as soon as possible. So you might have be partway through your career and think that I could continue working at my current job. I could try to switch to something that pays differently. I could try to switch to something with more direct impact. Within those, you might have 30 versions of each one of those. Spend like a brief amount of time on all of them, just like getting a really vague sense of if I was thinking about going into quantitative finance, what does that actually mean? What do I do there? Like a quick Google, and then talk to somebody. If like still seems okay, talk to somebody. If that still seems good, then like read a book, figure out what's going on. Just go deeper and deeper. I want to emphasize that the last section is still you take a job, you work there for 2 years. That is still an experiment. That is like sort of the most costly experiments you could plausibly do. But if you're 2 years in, evaluate the results of that experiment. If things are going good and this is like still adjusting for meaningful probabilities and optimism bias and all the other things, if this is going good, then like continue to do that. If after 2 years things seem like they are like good, but like maybe other information would be helpful and maybe other careers could be useful, try something else. Uh, it's surprisingly easy to, you know, Amazon talks about two-way doors. Most doors are two ways. Most job leavings, if you leave on good terms, are two ways. You can leave and come back, and you will have new information if I haven't done so. So, if I go to enroll early on, I think career capital is really, 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 really big. I think it's super underemphasized. So, what things can you do that put you in good positions for the future? Some of those things are just skills. Hey, I would like to learn more about machine learning. Seems like that's kind of a hype thing right now. Uh, how do I get out of my job doing front-end web development and do more machine learning? That's a skill-based thing. Some of it is like connections who you meet. I think it's a little overrated, but that's definitely an important thing. I think a thing that is sort of surprisingly helpful in career capital is uh, some sort of like signaling, not that I have like a formal credential, but that I have passed some sort of high bar somewhere, and my resume will now look impressive. We'll talk more in the interview section. Uh, the bar to get into an interview is by far like way, way, way harder than any of the actual interviews. The stats on success rate by phase are like 1% at Amazon. We get through the resume screen, and then it was like 10%. We get through the phone screen, and it was like 30%, 50%, or something like that. Your odds of success go up like drastically if you can just get through the stupid interview screen. And doing something that says like, "Hey, I'm read as confident on a resume" is really helpful for that. Things like personal fit do matter. Obviously, kind of a lot. If you are miserable doing a thing, you're going to be bad at the thing for one. Also, you're going to be miserable, which is not a thing even as an EA to neglect. Uh, some jobs, some like things you could do will give you uh, conditions that are better for the rest of your life. They will, really like let you be cooperative in ways that you want to be. They will give you the time off to raise a family in times that you need to. Some will not. And if I go to roll according to that, these next things are definitely EA specific. So uh, when you're at a role, a big thing is how much sort of impact does that job have? If you are uh, at Meta, as many of my friends are, and your job is to get people increasingly addicted to the scrolling on Instagram, uh, I got a little bit of judgment, but like you know, uh, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I'm not totally judgmental about that, but like consider the effect that your role has. You are an engineer. You are like a reasonably powerful, high-profile person on the sort of the scale of humanity, and what you do directly does have a lot of impact. That said, the counterfactuals matter a lot too. That someone else, for most jobs that you would take, if you don't take this job, someone else is gonna. If you don't take the job doing AI alignment or doing research into I don't know cancer, life-saving drugs or genomics or whatever, someone else is going to take that job almost certainly. How good are they going to be versus you? I would argue that on net, the the person who would take that job instead is going, if interviews mean anything, is going to be worse than you. They're going to do it worse. They're probably not going to do it like a lot worse. And so, uh, if you're considering taking the AI alignment job and you don't take the AI alignment job, the AI alignment researcher that does have it is going to be worse at it, but like it's not going to be like a huge net drain on humanity. If you go to quantitative finance, this is my thinking. The person who would have taken that job instead is not going to donate nothing. Uh, they are going to be deeply uncharitable, and no net good is going to come from the next person in the room, next person like down the list. So those kind of actuals, I think, matter a lot. I think that changes the sort of net impact of taking a job pretty substantially. Uh, so I talk about tests. I think the thing to do basically all the time is consider a long list of plans, but you only really need to like. I think you only really need to have like 2 or 3 that you really spend a lot of time on. Plan A is in the best possible case, if I took some risks and they paid off and it was really good, what would I want to do? I'd want to make my own company to do my favorite distributed systems thing, or in my case, I took a risk on a startup that does approximate compute. I just love me some approximate compute. Uh, and that didn't work out. Pretty quickly. It failed for actually different reasons than I expected it to, but that's fine. I had plan Bs. I could go back to uh, big tech. In my case, I actually ended up going into finance. Uh, when you have a plan B, make sure that it's still puts you in a good position for long-term success. You don't want your plan B to be like, I'm going to go be this thing that I really dread being. Uh, try to like set yourself up so that what if you fall back into plan B, because you probably will, uh, then you're still in a good position to 3 years down the road try again for plan A, or try to give yourself lots of options. And then think about like what is the worst possible thing that could happen. If you join somewhere and suddenly everyone's laying off everything, and uh, now it's really hard to get a job at all as a software engineer. Kind of a relevant situation right now. Or you've got a sudden medical condition, you've got family emergencies that come up. Uh, what's what's your fallback? Like, if all of your plans go awry, uh, what do you do? And the answer should be something. Uh, the answer could be, hey, I've got the skill that I know that I can do. I can always reliably be a design verification engineer at a CPU company. That pays terribly. It's really tedious. I don't want to do that. But I could definitely at any point take that job remotely or whatever, and it would be like totally pay the bills. My mortgage is secure. Because I know my mortgage is secure, I can take bigger risks. I can join companies that might go under at any time, or uh, who have standards that I might not meet, and maybe I just get fired. Like, I don't, I don't expect that to happen, but I can take these sort of bigger swings because I've got a security of, in the worst case, yes, I can do something and it will be okay. If you evaluate yourself and you find that your worst case is actually quite bad, that if in the worst case you lose your job and you lose your visa and you get evicted from the country, you lose your house, you lose your family, hey, maybe don't take big risks. That seems like a pretty rough sort of worst case. Don't take the big risk first. Like, build up better plan Z's. Does that make sense? Uh, Optionality, big fan of optionality. Uh, you at any point in your career, early especially, but even later, uh, it's really hard to tell what you're going to like, what the position of the world is going to be in. Uh, if you have career capital that lets you be in lets you do many things, that's going to help you a lot. So you want to have options that are anti-correlated, is an important thing. Uh, if you think of all your options, and you could work at uh, Facebook, or you could work at Instagram, or you could work at Twitter, or you could work at, you sort of name 4 companies that do the same thing basically, and that industry like goes in the tank. That's rough. That's like a rough place to be. So try to like make sure that skills that you have are, uh, if they fall out of fashion, that your backups are anti-correlated, that they are something that is going to be okay if your main thing goes bad. So for me, like finance and tech are pretty counter-cyclical. Finance makes a lot of money when things are weird. Tech makes a lot of money when things are going up consistently. And so it's nice. It's very nice for me to be able to bounce between those and know that if something happens to one of the industries that I work in, I could go to the other one. Uh, the example that I use sort of specifically is the support vector machine people were all the rage until pretty recently. Support vector machines were so big, so important. If you were the support vector machine expert, you could get jobs basically anywhere. Now, under no circumstances will anyone use a support vector machine for basically anything. And so if you built your career on this expertise, rough. You picked a ship that sank, and now you have regrets for not being the deep learning person. Some backups would have been good for you. And so, people talk about like T-shaped expertise. You want to have some like breadth and some depth. Maybe have like a couple of points of depth and have them be far apart. Uh, so reevaluate constantly. The industry changes, you change. You learn more about what you're like. You learn more about like what's best for you. My estimates of what a reasonable job would look like for me, even 5 or 6 years ago, were radically different. my sort of understanding of what a software engineer could get paid was roughly 1/10 of what a software engineer could actually get paid. Uh, and finding out this new information really made me reevaluate a lot of my career choices. And if I didn't have a fairly active process in doing that, that would go bad. Those are sort of the main frameworks. That's the things that I want to emphasize. Think about things in those terms. Uh, Having said that, I got an audience. I'm going to say things that people don't broadly agree with. Uh, People talk about like pay and interesting work or growth being sort of trade-offs, that you can take the high pay but boring job or whatever. I don't think it's true. I think that's like sort of an insane thing to say. People say that because they're cynical and they don't want to believe that jobs can be good or bad or better or worse. Uh, these things are not only sort of independent. I think they're probably positively correlated. I think more pay tends to come with more interesting work. That things that are like borderline automatable by Python script are going to pay sort of marginally better than they would pay the Python script. I think things that are like have a lot of breadth and interesting options tend to pay tend to pay very well. Uh, my model is that if you the career capital of changing jobs is huge. Both, especially early on, the pay raises can be huge, huge, huge. Uh, the amount of sort of different things you can learn by jumping around companies is huge. You pick 4 companies in 4 fields, and now your plan Z is great because you can jump to any one of those fields and have sort of point to relevant experience. Everything's good. Your plan A can be really good because now you've got lots of information, and so changing those jobs early seems quite beneficial. Uh, but I argue that uh, if you want to be sort of doing the most interesting and the highest pay things, that you sort of want to build some kind of expertise on something. That expertise could be in a technology, it could be in a industry, it could be in just a company. That if you're the one person who understands like how to really make things work at Google, or pick your own smaller company, if you're the one person who like can really get things working at AMD, uh, like that's hugely valuable, and there's a chance you could be rewarded accordingly. Okay. But being the director or CTO at a company is its own form of expertise. That expertise mostly in that company. I agree that location matters. People talk about remote work. I'm a fan of remote work, sort of, uh, but the different cities do still have specialties. I think Austin is disproportionately a hardware engineering city. I think Boston is disproportionately sort of biomedical stuff. San Francisco seems like it's very heavy in consumer technology. Uh, and so to some extent, choose your specialty by your location, or your location by your specialty to the extent that you can. Uh, don't rebuild your life around these things, but they matter, I think, pretty meaningfully at the margin. And then people who have done PhDs are either doing research in only a PhD with very low optionality, or they say that they don't matter at all. So I personally would be really interested in doing a PhD. I think it sounds great, like as that sort of personal matter. Uh, as a sort of practical career planning move, it's always seemed really suspect. So talk about specific stuff. These are all things that I think work quite differently, and we can talk about in Q&A different options. I think doing a startup is definitely a thing you could do. If you do that, it matters a ton whether you are co-founder number 3 or employee number 1. Employee number 1 gets no money and no upside. Co-founder number 3 gets a lot of good stuff. Big companies, not necessarily right this second, but in general have in the last 10 years offered incredible pay. Tend to be sort of very niche, but your career capital from saying I worked at Amazon or I worked at Microsoft can be great. People, if you're at a company people recognize, you get LinkedIn messages all the time, and then you never have to like apply for a job again, and that's really nice. I can't speak much to being a researcher. Being at a mid-sized company feels like it's the worst of all worlds to me. Being at an enterprise company is probably very stable and very sort of counter-cyclical. So if you wanted to, have as an option, if tech goes bad, I'm going to go work at Toyota. And Toyota has like software engineers, and they're totally reasonable people. they will get paid fine, and they will be secure at times when tech is going bad, and vice versa. So, I think that's not a terrible option. Software targeting other fields is just if you have a deep expertise in, say, medicine, and there are startups that really work with that expertise, then you could provide a lot of value there. People talk in EA specifically about, it seems like everyone is interested in doing three things: either earning to give, which I think finance and big tech are sort of the main things there. That's my advocate. I could talk independently and for a long time about AI safety. I'm very interested in the topic. I'm not sure that it's the most effective thing to do, but people in AI safety are, the people who have thought about this a lot in EA definitely push that very hard as like maybe the most important thing to do. And so if your skill sets work with that, then that's an excellent option. 80,000 Hours has been talking more about information security as a global policy priority, and I think that's an interesting thing. So I want to flag that as like, if this is something that you think you could be interested in, there is an argument from people that I respect that it's the best thing, or one of the best things. So talking about me, I define my goals. So I want to maximize learning, maximize net social good. Maximize net social good is either through direct impact of what I'm doing at the company, which again, because of these sort of like counterfactuals, I think those effects are not very strong. So the other thing I could do is maximize net social good by donations. Turns out you can make a ton of money, and so donations are quite effective. Big fan of that. In particular, for me, I'm good at interviewing. I've got a resume that gets me through sort of screening very quickly. Got a background in machine learning and hardware. I'm really bad at focusing. Being an independent researcher would be quite bad for me, as I learned at Recurse. I sort of need to sit in a room with other people or do stuff. A limiting factor for me is that C++ is very relevant for a lot of the jobs I need to do, but I'm quite bad at it. So evaluate my goals, evaluate my skills. Options that I should consider are, finance, sort of obviously. Startups is a thing that I've done before, pretty reasonable. AI alignment, I've got a machine learning background. I've got an interest in research. This is a pretty plausible thing for me. And then just, go back to big tech, go back to Amazon, Microsoft, whatever. So considering these options, I want to leave them all open. I'm currently at a finance company. That's, I think, my best current plan. But I think things that I should focus on are machine learning explainability. I think it'll be highly beneficial for both AI alignment, pretty good for a lot of big tech right now, quite good for my finance company that are very ML heavy. I think I really got to mitigate the C++ problems, and so making an active effort to learn C++ would be really good. I think I should really learn to finance, because finance is currently my plan A, and so I should really get better at the sort of minute by minute, what does edge mean? What is alpha versus beta? Really sort of internalize these things. And so my immediate plans are continue on my plan A, continue to work on my job that I started recently, but increase my optionality by trying to learn these things, focus on these things. Levels.fyi, if people haven't seen it, is the best thing ever. Fantastic for all kinds of stuff. Team Blind is a terrible place, and I don't recommend anyone go there, except that it is also has a lot of very accurate information about companies and pay, and so it's sort of like going to Mos Eisley and getting sort of the rundown of the world. Interview study we'll talk about later, but leak code or crack the coding interview are pretty normal things. There's a very good page here about salary negotiation. That's a huge deal. Thing I want to emphasize to basically everyone all the time. I have never heard of a case where negotiating has had any downside whatsoever, and it's often 10 minutes of work gets incredible benefits. I think I got 150K signing bonus for 10 minutes of negotiation. Super big deal. Miscellaneous stuff. Seriously, this is a thing I think is not true in most industries, and it's really hard to internalize. Compensation bands in the U.S. For software engineering are so wide. There's a post on people complaining about Netflix advertising salary bands of 90,000 to 900,000. and I think that's probably just genuine. I think like that's not them messing with you. I think like they really would just give you any number in that range. Uh, you can do so. A lot of the ranges from career planning, choosing companies that pay particularly well versus companies that pay particularly poorly, industries that pay particularly well. Uh, but you get like a meaningful bump from negotiation, like really substantial bumps from negotiation. Uh, so in general, this is sort of as hard a time as since at least 2008 to get into tech companies. So if you're not currently doing that, sort of particularly rough, but uh, it could be a good time to get other career capital. So, Nicole and I both spent time at the Recurse Center. I think it was valuable for connections and for skills, uh, trying to do things that, getting into open source projects that just to have on your resume, hey, I worked on Redis or whatever. I have no idea if Redis is open source, but like it was something that sort of name brand that people would recognize either for connections or just for their branding. Could be quite a good time for that. Last thing, if you're in a job, things that are really helpful, get stuff used very early. First of all, you get value from getting your stuff used. You also get information from getting your stuff used. If you've got a project and you're working on it for 6 months and then you ship it, I can say from experience that there's a pretty good chance that that thing is useless and no one will ever use it, and you will feel sad and you will look bad at in interview reviews when someone asks you, what did you do? And you say like, I shipped a thing and everyone forgot about it. Learning from other people, I think really underrated. Just being generally agreeable is really underrated. And the things that have been the biggest sort of professional advancements in my career have been doing very simple things, like very simple things, like a Python script that just SSH'd into droplets, downloaded relevant logs, and did like a grep for like the 4 common problems. That was like half of my interview review one time was like how much people like that product. It took me like 4 hours. Just do small useful things over complicated things in basically any situation. And then I've got some links. I'll post this stuff on Facebook, but 80,000 hour stuff. Before we talk about interview strategies, I want to go through questions because I really think this is the more important section.
Hey, Taylor. I think probably the most trouble that I've had is figuring out when it's good enough. It feels like there's just such depth to this industry that is unlike any other, and that is both empowering, but is also terrifying, And I think when it comes to career pathing, it's always hard to figure out like, oh, is it now that I'm supposed to make a leap?
Offhand, my thoughts are that in any aspect of this, doing cheap tests early is good. So if you're trying to figure out if your code is good enough, try to get someone to use it and see if they like it. If they like it, ship it immediately. Under just go. Make sure it doesn't have like massive security flaws or something, but like it's pretty easy to like change it after it's done. It's like very agile. People are very into that. You get like massive amounts of new information that you're not going to get if you don't ship it. So similarly, like you can think about how much risk, how risk averse you are, but if another job, probably on average, if another job seems as compelling to you, it's worth at least strongly considering just taking that immediately. Especially like if you haven't done a lot of things, getting that information is really good. I think most things turn out better than you expect. And again, with a couple of exceptions, I do think you might find that the worst case is that you go back to your old place. That's probably not true right this second. Literally, like within the last 3 months, that's probably less true than it's been in a long time. But in general, if you're on good terms with your team and say, hey, I'd like to be very honest that, hey, I really like what I'm doing, but this startup that I'm thinking about joining is just really like hits my niche interests in approximate compute in a way that doesn't make sense here. And I've loved working with everyone, but I have to take this opportunity. And then you go and it turns out like, no, that place sucks. That place is like totally a fraud or whatever. I don't know, go back to your old place or make a new test. You make 3 new tests, and then if you're original place was the best, then go back to that.
Does anybody else have questions? I have one. Taylor, do you have a recommendation in terms of making sure that you are not doing invisible work? Or just that you're making sure that what you contribute to a team is sufficiently visible to your boss and your boss's boss and so on?
Yeah, that is definitely a hard one. Other people I think are better than me at this, as you might expect by my willingness to talk here. I'm sort of willing to be pretty public about my thoughts about stuff. And in fact, a decent amount of, I think, what I've gotten credit for in terms of sort of leadership that becomes visible is sort of like long messages explaining what I'm doing. There are companies where the practices, I think, make this a lot easier. I think a place like Amazon, where basically every sort of meaningful decision you document and you say, here's what I'm thinking, here's what good I think it's going to do, and you make that very public. That's relatively straightforward to sort of advertise yourself in. I think there's places that the most valuable work is hidden, and you like really do have to make choices between, am I going to be useful or am I going to be visible? And there's sort of like a moral aspect to that. Like it feels moral to do the useful thing, and it feels like you will get rewarded for doing the visible thing, and that sucks. There's just companies with these sort of perverse incentives to avoid maintenance and only just ship like pretty new things. And if you can tear down someone else's project to build your own in place, then you get a promotion. I think Google is sort of famous for this. It feels like an organizational problem. If you're in an organization like that, I don't know what to do. It's hard to change that kind of culture.
Yeah, I think just to summarize, what works for one organization may not work in the next organization. So pretty much going in with a blank slate and adapting to the strategies that work for your manager, perhaps. And also just make sure that you're very clear documenting everything that you're doing, putting that in a place where people can see it.
Yeah, document it in public and say, hey, this thing exists now. This problem is solved. It can be good. Even if that's just like a wiki page that says, here is my team's projects. You can say your team, and if you just like go out of your way to list your teams, but
Yeah.
if it will make it harder to forget your own if your own is like among this list of things that you use to demonstrate value at some point.
Mhm. Yeah, help support others, and rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing.
All right, I'm gonna hop into interview strategies. I'm
Great.
gonna breeze through this a little bit because a lot of what I'm gonna say is just the things that you know. You might not know that you know them, but you know them. Getting to the interview is the hardest part. Everything's practicable. Negotiate stuff. I'm done. That's it. I'm gonna talk more, but I'm done. Uh, So the usual thing to do is you get in the pipeline somehow, and we'll talk a lot about that. And then there's a phone screen, an on-site offer negotiation. Some companies do this slightly differently. Some do like add a stage here or there, but like this is definitely like the base model. So most important thing, get into the pipeline. That's the hardest part by a huge amount. But I say hardest part on average. You specifically might find that I always fail out at the phone screen or whatever. And if that's your case, then ignore me and practice phone screen stuff. I think the sort of default thing that you should optimize for is get into the pipeline. Best thing to do is just skip the whole interview, have someone decide to hire you, and then go through the interview as a formality. That's definitely a thing that happens. That's the easiest thing. I have not done that. People I know haven't like moved around enough. I think there's places that I could do that, but the thing I think is easiest for me is these next two. So either referral from an employee to someone who's not like the hiring manager who has all powerful control. So to someone you just know. It doesn't need to be someone you know well. Just literally like any name that gets attached to your resume that says, "Hey, if this person doesn't get at least a phone screen, someone will be like vaguely interested in why." It's like it sort of changes the resume screen from like opt in to opt out. And I think that's huge, huge, huge. I think if a recruiter finds you on LinkedIn, or I've done this before, you find a recruiter on LinkedIn. Don't message random employees. That's weird. But like recruiters love that. So find someone to forward you to a recruiter or whatever. Just like get someone who has like some ownership over you joining the company. last choice is you write a resume, you find their website, you submit the resume, and it goes in a big pool of resumes, and you hope for the best. That's pretty random number generatory. You can do your best to write a good resume, do a little bit of tailoring for the specific company. If you know that company X like really values skill Y that you have, they're I'm applying to Jane Street and they're like huge functional programming people, then like I'll emphasize my functional programming background. If they're like big performance people, then I'll like emphasize the performance background. So I might have like 4 or 5 versions of a resume that I sort of choose which one I send to which place, and they're all honest. They're just like have different focuses. Uh, so that like changes your percentages a little bit, but like you are at that point playing a numbers game. Just apply to a bunch of places, expect to not get into any of them, and just keep doing that for a long time. Phone screens. Sometimes they do like automated tests before this. I think this is sort of annoying because they waste your time, not the companies, and I sort of like it when it's one-to-one. Sometimes someone from HR will ask you like really basic things. This is actually sort of a tricky interview to get through because they're not asking for, would you be successful in this job? They've got like a checklist of, I need to hear that you have worked at least 3 years with technology X. If you've not worked at least N years with technology X, and you may not know exactly what it is they're asking, saying that I've worked with something related, but feel comfortable transitioning, that's all totally fine to say. Phone screens are usually pretty easier. They usually give you time to ask about the role. I would recommend like have genuine questions. Also, just be like genuinely interested in everything all the time. Is really helpful. Big like pro move and all the time. So asking about like what their sort of core problems are. Don't ask for things that you could Google. Be like trying to figure out like genuinely, would you be a good fit for this role? You should, if you are not evaluating them at the same time they're evaluating you, then A, you're sort of missing an opportunity. B, your sort of compensation step is going to be harder because like you should be like making a genuine choice here, and having like some understanding of what you're trading off for compensation is going to make it harder to negotiate. On-site, there's a lot of variety here. Sometimes they do them virtually, sometimes they still fly you out. Could be 3 hours, 8 hours, often 1 hour blocks, sometimes lunch. Sometimes lunch is graded. If you are like weirdly racist or whatever, then lunch will become graded. So be on reasonable behavior all the time. Leak code is the way things are, for better or worse, in most places, most of the time. Often people will ask behavioral questions. Sometimes I ask trivia about like, in C++, what is the, what standard introduced the garbage collector, and what standard removed it? Whether these are good questions or not, sometimes they'll ask. You'll know them or you don't. It's not worth prepping for. Occasionally I get like a code review. I think those are fun. Pretend you got this code review. Provide feedback. Once I got a literal IQ test, wouldn't plan on that, but things happen. So you get through the onsite. People like you. You asked a lot of questions. You decided like this is a pretty plausible place for you. Go through the negotiations. So every offer is going to have different components. These components all trade off against each other in ways that you can manipulate in pretty meaningful ways. A company might give you a really large base salary and sort of zero bonus, zero stock. They might give you a lot of stock, but it sort of vests later. Compensation can be one time or recurring. You can get like big signing bonuses, which particularly if you sort of are not totally sure that you're committed to this company, because you shouldn't be sure that you're committed to this company at the start. Don't underrate those. Those are often, signing bonuses are often the easiest thing to negotiate up because it doesn't like show up as like recurring costs for them. And if like you average 3 years at a company, with options of 1, then like, hey, those add up real fast. So figure out, you can sort of look at leak or levels.fyi or things like that. Figure out like what things are pretty standardized. If everyone gets a base salary of 165,000, you're probably not going to negotiate that up. If everyone gets a base salary of 165,000 and stock seems like all over the place for the same job level, apparently they negotiate stock. Ask for more stock. It's also worth knowing what matters to you. If you need a certain base salary to like make your mortgage company happy, then like that's what you should negotiate for. If you care about like vacation, that's a negotiable thing. If you've got multiple offers, and I would really recommend having multiple offers, you can often sort of negotiate individual aspects of these things. So not just like, hey, my offer from Amazon is better than my offer from AMD. Can you AMD up your offer? And then you take that offer and you go back to Amazon and say, hey, my AMD offer is competitive. Can you up your offer? And you do it until you get tired of making money. You could also say, hey, my AMD offer I know is worse, but it has a better vacation policy or it has a better signing bonus. Amazon, can you increase your signing bonus to match AMD signing bonus? One thing that I learned recently, and this has gotten me more good stuff than I could possibly imagine, is to have multiple offers, be going in the cycle a little bit, and then after maybe one round of that, say, I will stop interviewing other places and I'll sign right now if X. I gave one company 4 options for what X could be. I said, if you give me any one of these, I'll stop and just sign your thing. They gave me all 4 of them. Real good phrase. They really like stop messing around and just sign a stupid offer. So if you're doing these questions, leak code, just practice. These things are like a pain in the butt. There's a certain mindset you have to learn to make them work, but they're very practicable. Compare solutions with other people. Recursive is a lot of fun for this. Try to like make an active effort to do better. Don't just like go like, oh, I got the question right. Figure out like, oh, I got the question right, but if I go online, then this other person does it in 3 lines less of Python, or like their Python like has this neat generator tool or whatever. Like, oh, great, do that. When you're doing this, keep talking all the time. Keep talking. Like staring in silence at someone who is like writing on a whiteboard is real weird for everyone involved. There's studies on this. You say like what you're thinking. You'll get hints if you say what you're thinking. That's great. You want those. Those do not count against you, but you don't get them if you don't talk. So behavioral questions. So people ask you like, tell me about a time when you improved the performance of a product or fixed a long-standing cultural issue. They might also ask, what would you do if the product crashed? And you say, oh, I would fix it. Those are bad questions, but judge companies that ask you questions about what would you do if. Sometimes they just ask you like vibe stuff, like they just want to hang out. Also judge those companies. Those are bad companies. But maybe it'll work for them anyway. I don't know. Anyway, for the behavioral questions that you care about, tell me about a time when, those are also very practicable. So like go through your background and think about like what stories can you tell. Often the same story works really well for large groups of questions, especially if you sort of change focus a little bit. Make sure that you're genuinely answering the question. Don't just be like, hey, I picked a story that I'm going to tell you. That's weird, but like to say, hey, you want to know about a time where I improved performance? Let me tell you about like a weird bug that I found, and in fixing that, it sort of made it easy to resolve 8 other functional things, 8 other performance things. Like that's a totally reasonable thing. System design is also very practicable, but in ways that I have a hard time talking about. They're going to ask you, say, pretend that you're developing Twitter, design like a diagram of like what things talk to what. Just add like, make sure you ask questions. Make sure you ask like, what things are going to be big here, what things are going to be small here. Talk about performance that are, no one ever like really needs you to do performance in real life in a lot of cases, but they're really into it in interviews. So if you like talk about scaling, bottlenecks, trade-offs, like people like eat that stuff up. Very practicable skill. Again, maybe meaningfully disconnected from like the art of being a programmer, but like we're talking about a separate process. We're talking about the process of like optimizing your career, and like for better or worse, that is a slightly different skill set. People also do code reviews and stuff. Those are neat. I actually like those. Seriously, like be easy to talk to. Don't suck. Like basic aspects of like empathy. This is not like faking things. Just like use people's names and like ask questions that indicate genuine interest and are not like sort of peevish. So, when you do ask questions, make sure that you are aware of like what vibe they put off. If you talk a lot about your last company and how much they suck, then like, well, you sort of sound like you're someone who's sort of not super fun to be around, even if like maybe they did objectively suck. You're gonna come off as like just sort of complainy. You know, it is good to have multiple options. It is probably easiest to have those be multiple offers. But hey, I genuinely like my current job, and I am sincerely considering staying here. You providing me an offer is not a guarantee that I'll take the offer. Is still a pretty reasonable like way to negotiate offers and to sort of maximize your things. And I will refer you back to Don't Call Yourself a Programmer Salary Negotiation. Sort of, I wrote a blog with tips that I learned from Recurse on making Python very small. Some of these are not very practical, but I thought it was fun. And then Levels and Blind are still like major resources for compensation negotiations, and even for what is the interview process like. Reddit has a lot of like I interviewed at X. Here's the questions they asked me, and they're not going to ask you the same questions, but those might be a pretty good like sign of the kinds of things people care about. And that's what I got. That's me today. Questions on any topic?
At Recurse, we had this thing where people would unmute and clap at the end of presentation. So I'm going to have us do that now. So everyone, please unmute and clap for Taylor. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Taylor. I think the raise hand is good because it does put people into a queue. So let's use that feature.
Hi, thank you, Taylor, for the presentation. Just a quick question about, is there like a recommended number of years to stay at a job before moving on to the next one?
I think people worry too much about this. So imagine like you looked at a resume and it said that a person X was at 6 jobs in a year and a half. They were at every job for 3 months. You might reasonably predict that they'll be at your job for 3 months, and that will probably like not pass interview or not get you into the interview. If you looked at a resume, it was 3 years, 4 years, 3 years, 6 months, 3 years. You looked at that and you went, "Hey, there's one weird thing here. Wonder what's up with that." And maybe you ask about it, and maybe you like explain and it's got a good reason. I was at Mythic for 6 months and left, and I think I've got a pretty compelling case for why. That's pretty reasonable. I don't know. I think just like it shouldn't be like that hard to sort of look at something and sort of evaluate. Does this seem like a person who will be around for long enough to be useful? And if it's a series of 2-year jobs, then like that sort of seems harder than a series of 4-year jobs, but also like you get more information. So I don't know, like I would probably try to like stick it out for at least 6 months or a year if you have not had like some long experiences for a while. I think like if you have no long experiences recently, then like try harder, stick it out. I think if you've got like your last job was 4 years and you tried something and it didn't work out, then like that seems a lot more reasonable than like I've never stayed at a job long enough to like experience the consequences of my actions.
I see. And just a quick follow-up question, if that's okay. Say you joined a company and things were terrible, and you're planning to, like, how would you justify that in an interview if they ask you about it without being complaining?
I mean, if they ask you about it, you're sort of open to be more complaining. Like I'm still sort of there's an art to framing things positively. That when people ask me why I left Mythic, I was there for 6 months. I say that I was really excited. Let's talk about why I went there first. I was really excited to sort of learn all the aspects of hardware, software, co-design. I was really excited to sort of learn, work across teams at this company. And I started, and they introduced a weekend a policy of information siloing, that teams should stop working together. And like, well, that fundamentally doesn't work for me. And so I spent 3 months trying to fix that. And after it sort of became clear that they really do want to have a silo company, and that that's like fundamentally the opposite of what I'm looking for, then like I started looking for other work. And so I mean, I think it's a pretty like reasonable way to frame that in the way of like not, hey, this company sucks. Is that this company's like not working for me. Maybe they're not like bad, but like I will work well for you. You should not be worried about the things that maybe leave there. It probably doesn't apply to you, or if it does, then like you should tell me, and I should just not come here.